All right. Well, my name is Tristan Roberts, and our podcast is the Quilnick Experience. And I want to welcome today Joe McKay from Homedale, New Jersey. Uh, Joe, I asked you how you want to be introduced. You said just regular Joe.
That's all. I'm just a regular guy.
Well, tell me you like. I mean, we're just talking about the Rangers. You're a big Rangers fan.
Yes, I am.
Uh,
It's very, very happy that they're playing well this year as well.
yeah.
And I've been watching hockey ever since. I played on the on the New York City Fire Department. They had a tournament every year called King of the Ice. The fire department team,
Yeah.
the A team, the real guys that can play hockey. They run it. They run it, and each firehouse tries to put a hockey team together, and we meet, and it's for charity. So there's usually maybe 60, 70 teams playing each other. I think
Wow.
it's about 60, 70, maybe a little less, but it's a good time.
What was the name of your firehouse when you were doing that?
I worked in Engine Company 201. We had a few names. The Emerald Isle was one of the names, and we were also known as the Can Do Engine. We were in Sunset Park, Brooklyn.
The Can Do Engine.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
Did you always want to be a firefighter? Were you one of those kids?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I was one of those kids. I had an uncle in the '70s. He was on the fire department. He worked in the Bronx, and he came over my house, and he took me to the closest firehouse. I was probably like 5 years old, and I still remember that trip. And we didn't live that far from a firehouse. I grew up in a public housing project in Staten Island. It was only a few blocks away, and whenever you hear the license sirens, kids always get excited. A couple of years later, I have another uncle that got on the fire department as well. So it's always been on my radar. It's always an exciting it was always an exciting thing for me to see the fire engine, and so yeah, that lit the spark very very early on as a 5 year old.
Yeah. Did you get right into that out of high school? How did you?
No, I didn't. I actually didn't. I didn't take the tests until I was in my mid 20s. I had a little bit of a delay there. My father advised me to learn computers, so I went to a technical school, and I was going down that road. But um, I actually got. I was doing pretty good. After I got out of technical school, I got into the elevator union. I was a union elevator constructor in New York City. Worked on some high-rise buildings. I did construction, and then I went into the maintenance and repair department after a few years. So I was doing well, but I still had that itch to be a firefighter. So I had taken a test back in, I think it was 1992. I took the written test, but I didn't get hired until 6 years later because there was a delay in the testing. So I got hired in '98 and hung up my elevator hat and took on the fire department challenge.
Wow. So I got to go back to what did your father do for a living?
My father was an elevator mechanic.
Okay.
Yeah, he was. Third generation.
I'm just so curious when,
We had
father, I mean, parents sometimes steer us in these ways. Like he was an elevator mechanic. He saw you being computer science. Like he thought, but you want to be a firefighter.
Yeah, well, at the time. Yeah, at the time he was. Computer technicians were doing pretty good, and I guess there was. He had some ups and downs, and pardon the expression, no pun intended there. The elevator joke. Ups and downs in the elevator business. The employment, there was in the '70s, there were layoffs, and when the economy got bad, so he spent some time on the unemployment line. So I think he wanted to avoid that, for me, and he was kind of pushing me towards towards a computer job. But by the time I got out into the field, the pay wasn't as good as it was when it originally started, and I was married and. I needed to make a little more money, so I put an application in for the union, and he put a good word in for me, and I got in after
Yeah,
that. So
that's great. I mean, parents always want better uh, for their kids. I think that's
it's in our nature,
yeah.
absolutely.
You a father?
Yeah, two girls. Yeah,
How old?
they're my oldest is 30, and the youngest is 28.
Nice.
They're both doing well.
I'm glad to hear that. I got myself. I have a 12-year-old son, and I got another on the way right now, due in August.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Um,
Yeah.
what did you?
It's
So when
fun,
you,
right?
yeah, it's an incredible ride. It's exciting.
Yeah.
We're excited. Yeah. Um, Speaking of incredible rides, so you joined the fire department in '98. How'd it go?
I was so happy. I mean, I don't even know if there's words for it. Um, yeah, 13 weeks of hell it was in the fire academy. That's what they say. 13 weeks of hell will give you 30 years of heaven.
Why? What makes it
Um,
hell?
yeah, that well, it's boot camp kind of. They beat you down like as they would do in the boot camp. You get you get your butt kicked. They're working you. It's you're running, you're training, and you're studying, and there's really no time to do anything else but that. Um, towards the end, the drill instructors kind of lighten up on you, and you really form your team, your squad that you're with in the academy. You form that brotherhood that's going to carry you through through the job, and they're hard on you because it's not an easy job. It's you got to be prepared for when things get tough, and quite often things do get tough. So the training in the New York City Fire Department is really pushed. They really real heavy emphasis on training early on in the academy.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, the academy's the time wise, it's no longer 13 weeks; it's much longer than that now. After 9/11, a lot of the a lot of other training had to come in, terrorist training and WMD training and stuff like that had been added on. So
Yeah.
but yeah, it was just it was an incredible feeling to be sworn in and become a New York City firefighter. I was like I said, it was a dream.
Well, take me back to, was there a moment when you sworn in, you're new on the job? Um, was there a moment you recall from that early time when you were like, that just comes to mind, wow, I'm in the right place, or wow, this is not what I signed up for, or wow, I'm good at this. Like what strikes you from that time?
Uh, One of my first flyers. I don't remember if it was my first or maybe it was within the first week or two. I was on the fire department. The adrenaline's going. We had a call. We would get notified that there were multiple calls, which usually means that there's a working fire. And when you turn the corner, you got all the training, and you've been practicing this for months, and there's a crowd of people standing in their underwear at 2 in the morning in the street, and there's flames ripping out of out of windows, and the adrenaline rush that you get, and it's an amazing feeling, and to know that you're going to finally get to do what you've been training to do, and if we don't wish for a fire, we never wish for a fire in the New York City Fire, or any fireman really, but when it comes, we it's showtime, and it's time to go, and the adrenaline and the feeling you get after the fact when the fire goes out, nobody gets hurt, and hopefully the house or someone's life gets saved. It's a really good feeling, you know. So it's the excitement and the camaraderie, which is unbelievable. Guys, you go out the door, and that all of those guys that are running a rig with you got your back, and you got theirs. There's something special in that too. I experienced the brotherhood in the elevator union. I got my first taste of it there. How guys look out for each other, and when I got on the fire department, it was just took it to another level. So those were some great things.
Yeah. I'm just curious. There can be a good and a bad to these situations. These hierarchical sort of organizations like this can be hard on the individual at times. Sometimes I experience that. I've talked to people that have been through that. Did that ever get to you, or you know?
No, believe it or not, no. The politics and the the BS kind of would say would not really trickle down to the guys in the firehouse for the most part. I mean, there was some stuff. There's always going to be some stuff, but the officers and the chiefs on the fire department really take care of the guys. And the attitude was, and it's still kind of that way now. I guess I don't know. I've been out of the job now for some time, but I know it was definitely this way. When if the fire went out and nobody got hurt, that's really where the main concerns.
Yeah.
Not if you were wearing the correct uniform, or if you decided to wear dungarees today instead of a dress, your dress uniform pants. But back then it was just like, the fire goes out and nobody gets hurt. That's the chiefs are happy, and you put on a good meal on the table as well. That's changed a little bit, but all in all, it's still a great job.
That's incredible satisfaction that you must have felt. Thank you
Yeah.
thank you for all the fires you put out, everything you did on the job. How long you were you a firefighter for?
13 years. If I had it my way, it would have been 30, but
Yeah.
I had some ailments, and I can get into that later.
Well, let's get into it. I think there's a key part of the story of where were you the morning of September 11th, 2001?
September 11, 2001, I was not scheduled to work. My company it was our turn to run a fundraiser, a fire department fundraiser that we have for our battalion. The five or six companies in our battalion, actually, is it six? I'm seven now. We had like an emergency fund. So if someone's kid gets sick, or someone has a family emergency, we had a few dollars in there and we would help them out with that. So it was our turn to run a fundraiser that year, and we decided to do a golf outing. I don't golf. And I also, this was in 2001 on September 11th was the day it was planned. So I had offered to work. Shotzi was my buddy. He had 8 years on. He was senior to me. And I was that's your thing. When you go to the firehouse, you're the junior guy. You work those tours. You work Christmas, you step up. You work New Year's, you work the holidays, you work for events. So it was, I felt that it was my duty to step up and work that tour. So I had offered to work that tour for Shotzi. And he said, "Nah, don't worry about it. You just go to the outing and I'll work." We were on the golf course that morning. It was a beautiful day. Wasn't a cloud in the sky, and guys started teeing off, and I was at the table signing guys in. And someone had come out from the clubhouse and said, "Hey, a plane just hit the Trade Center." So we all looked at each other and said, "Geez." We went in, we watched it on TV. I called the firehouse. I spoke to Shotzi, and we were talking fire talk, saying what's going on, the units being assigned, and we're talking about how many people were trapped above that fire and how difficult it would be to put the fire out. I hung up with the phone with him, and a few minutes later, we watched the second plane hit. And at that point, it seemed like 2 minutes, or not even within 2 minutes, we got everybody's phone call started. Everybody's phones were going off. And we got word that there was a total recall. So a total recall is something that they had told us about in the academy, but it was like one of those things that this will never happen,
Mm-hmm.
And the total recall is every firefighter, EMT, paramedic, and police officer needs to come into work. You just drop what you're doing and you come into work, So the order was go to the nearest firehouse, sign in the logbook, get equipment and gear, and get to the World Trade Center. So we made our way. We made our way to the Trade Center. We stopped. We stopped in Staten Island, the closest firehouse. Signed in there, and then there was no gear left by the time we got there. So we went over the Verrazano Bridge into Brooklyn, and we went to our firehouse, and there were a few guys there getting equipment ready. I grabbed my own gear. We commandeered a bus, a New York City Transit bus, and we filled it up with as much stuff as we could. We picked up another group of firemen from another firehouse, and we made our way down. Um, we got to the battery tunnel. Battery tunnel they had just closed it because they were worried about possible secondary devices or bombs in the tunnel, and they had to sweep the tunnel. So then we ended up going to the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge, and some of this stuff is still kind of fuzzy because we were all in shock. But the first tower had collapsed in transit to the bridge, and then when we got over to the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge there, that area in downtown Brooklyn, the second tower had come down. When we were there, there was a chief who was stopping any companies from going into Lower Manhattan at the time because the second tower had just come down, and the command post was was destroyed, and there was kind of no command structure in place at the time. A lot of the chiefs had been killed in the collapse. So it was a few minutes before we were able to get over, and we made our way into Lower Manhattan. It was it was still pretty thick there. The bus driver had to stop when we got over the bridge because he couldn't see anymore, and we mustered up. And I say we, on the other side of the bridge where we were, there were probably 100 pieces of apparatus and maybe 1,000 or 2,000 firemen ready to go to work to get into Lower Manhattan. So yeah, we mustered up by City Hall, and we eventually made our way around. We had to go downtown because a lot of the buildings that were surrounding the Trade Center, the small ones, 3, 4, and 5, were burning from top to bottom. And the heat was so, was the radiant heat off the buildings was still burning hot, so you really couldn't even get down the street. So we had to walk around, but. Yeah, we tried to look for our company. We found the rig, but the guys weren't around. And there was a chief walking by, and one of the officers that I was with, he says, "Where do you need us, chief?" And he just turned and looked at us, and he said, "Pick a fire and put it out." And it was, I can't explain. There's no words for what it was like to be down there in those early moments. Eerie. I guess it was kind of like you were in an apocalyptic movie, but it was real. There was no hydrants. The hydrants weren't serviceable. All the water mains were broke, I guess, when the buildings came down. So we had to get a fireboat. A marine firefighter had started it up. It was in mothballs, believe it or not. It had just been decommissioned, and he brought it to downtown, right off of Battery Park City, and there was one fitting on that ship that he could send water to a manifold to our engine company. So we had to stretch. We had to find a few blocks worth of hose to get water to start fighting the fire, and we did that for 48 hours. And in the meantime, when it was the first night we were up. We were putting a fire out in a building south of the South Tower. We were shooting our hose lines out off the 17th floor into the other building. It was early in the morning, and it was probably like 2 or 3 in the morning. And we went down. We got relieved by another company, and we started making our way onto the pile to see if we could find areas to search and avoid. Mm-hmm. And that went on for 2 days. My captain sent me home. Sent me and a few other guys home. We got ordered to go home, which is something that you don't really ever get done with the fire department. You guys just know what they're doing. The bosses, the officers don't even have to tell guys what to do. And they just know what to do. But that was the first time my captain ordered me. He said, "Go home, go to the hospital, get your eyes washed, and you can come back tomorrow." And I had this tremendous feeling, the guilt. At that point, the list of firefighters that were missing had come out already, and Shotzi was on it, as well as the other guys from my company. 4 guys from my company were killed. Shotzi, his name was John Shard. Greg Buck, Chris Pickford, and Lieutenant Paul Martini were the four from my company. I also knew altogether 26 guys that were killed that day. We had a training program with the New York City Fire Department 2 years before. It was called the rotation program. So you went for a year's worth of training in another firehouse. So you worked in a year in that other firehouse, and you got to know these guys, and they become family in a way too. So the amount of guys that most people knew because of that program was even greater. It was a tough time. Those first 48 hours were pretty. We were in shock. Like I said, I had a cell phone. Not too many guys did have a cell phone. I had one from my previous job. I kept it, and the cell phone service was spotty. But every once in a while, I would get a phone call, and I got 2 phone calls. One was from my wife's best friend, and her husband had worked in the trade center. He was a tech guy, and he was texting back then. It was before it was popular, and he was not able to get a signal. He was trapped above where the first plane hit, and he texted his wife, and who was my wife's best friend, and he explained to us he said, I'm above where the plane, I'm above the fire. I'm with so and so. He listed the 4 other people that he was with. One of them was a woman that was 8 months pregnant. And, the firemen are coming up to get us. I love you. And that was the message she got. And she got that message. And shortly after, she watched the tower come down. So she called me later in the day. And, that was a rough phone call.
What did she say to you?
How do you, she was hysterical. And, she's just asking if I'd seen him. And what do you tell her? I mean, in the moment, we were hearing stories. The story was that there's people who made it out alive. Okay.
Yeah.
Turned out to be true. Some people did make it out of that building alive. Rode the building down was the term that was being thrown around. People rode the building down and they walked out. So I told her that. I had heard it, one of the things that was flying around, one of the rumors that was flying around early on. Ironically, it turned out to be true. The guy, somebody did ride the building down. He came forward many years later. It's a documentary was done on him. He's called the 9/11 Surfer. But I used that story to try to give her some hope at the time.
Yeah.
I also got a call from Jeanette, who was Shotzi's wife. And she was asking if I had seen John, and I said, I told her, no, it's a mess down here. I know there's guys in the hospital that are getting their eyes cleaned. He could be anywhere. So, what do you say? We didn't have the list of firefighters yet, but turned out that Jeanette actually was at the doctor's office that morning. She had an appointment to confirm that she was pregnant with their 3rd child. I know. So, yes, that's what it was like the first.
When did you
48
find that
hours.
out? She didn't tell you.
A couple days after. No, she didn't tell me then. We found out a couple days later. So it was like that for stories like that kept coming in.
Yeah.
When I left, I was with 4 other guys from my company when my captain said, go. This was like 48 hours later. Go home, go to the hospital, get your eyes washed out, get flushed, and then come back in the morning. So we got a ride from the New York City Police Department, the harbor unit. They run the marine unit. They run the boats, and they had they were shuttling people across the harbor. So they gave us a ride back into Brooklyn from Lower Manhattan. When we got into we got into Brooklyn and we started walking. We walked back up to our firehouse. We walked down 4th Avenue. which is a big wide. It's
Yeah.
like kind of like a mall in the middle. It's a big wide street. And this is kind of when it hit me. Uh, the shock of it all. We were walking down, and people got at it. People stopped. The civilians just stopped, got out of their cars. They were hanging out of their windows, and they were clapping for us. And that's when we all lost it. Everything kind of started sinking in at that point, and in my head, I think that that's when my survivor's guilt really kicked in. I just remember thinking clearly, how are they clapping for me? I don't understand why they're clapping for me. I should still be there. I should have been working that tour. It was rough going to work down there every day on the pile. The flyers were going up. People, missing their loved ones, and we would go to work down there, and we'd see them all over in the subways, pasted on the walls. So there wasn't a place you looked where you didn't see them.
Yeah.
6 months of basically, if we weren't working on a pile, trying to find something to bring home, some find people and the missing, and have something that families could, something that families could bury. We weren't doing that. We were working on working in a firehouse, or going to funerals, which there were a whole lot. Some days there were 8 or 10. There were memorials when we didn't have bodies. People, they needed some closure, so they started doing memorials in October, November, and then forward. And as time went on, when people found, if a body was recovered, then they would have the option to have a funeral. So a lot of people had memorials and then funerals, and we couldn't attend each one of them. Like I said, they were spread out all over the place, and there were 8 or 10 a day. And then if we weren't doing that, we were taking care of the families. So it was, constant. You working on a pile, going to funerals, memorials, taking care of the families, and then working in a firehouse in between. We had to cover the area as well.
How quickly did it become apparent, the sort of environmental situation you're in with the smoke, the dust?
That was, immediately when I said before, when we were, putting fire out in that 17th floor,
Mm-hmm.
we came down, we went on the pile, we're digging, and we're looking, and everything was still burning on the pile. And there was a senior firefighter there. I don't remember who he was. But there was smoke coming out from the pile, and the smoke was colored. There was like different, you look at, the smoke was black in one section. It was gray in one section. It was purple. Like purple in one section. And one of these senior firemen said to me, pointed at that section of the pile, "Don't breathe that shit in. We don't know what the hell don't breathe that stuff in." So we knew, guys knew right off the bat. The smell was, it wasn't the normal everyday fire where you go, when we were in Brooklyn, it was a lot of wood frame buildings, so that wasn't that wood smell. And, it was really something we'd never experienced before, but we knew early on, no smoke is good to breathe. But this was, all of the stuff that was in that building, the plastics and, and the chemicals, the asbestos, and,
Yeah.
there were chemical compounds made that day. And I had heard this from a chemist early on. There were chemical compounds made that day that had never even been imagined in a lab anywhere. When you take everything that was in those buildings, and, the building basically, as it came down, it disintegrated, and then, you're heating it up and you're burning it at a few thousand degrees for 99 days. And, so you're going to get some new chemical compounds, and we're all basically lab rats. That's the reality. The true extent of the toxic exposure that we face down there won't be known till we're all dead and gone.
What were you wearing for personal protective equipment?
I had my bunker gear. But early on, there were a few paper masks that guys were throwing around. But after about 15, 20 minutes, between you sweating, And the water, if you're trying to fight a fire, it's useless. So the paper masks ended up disappearing, and not everybody even had them. So we had early on we had our hoods. We have like a firefighting hood,
Yeah.
protective. We try to breathe through that, but it's not it's a fabric, and wasn't much at all. Wasn't much protection at all. So the cough and I mean it gets it everywhere. It's in your ears, your mouth, your nose. It was your eyes. The guys they had stations, and they had doctors. There were plenty of medical people down there, and EMTs and medics. All they were doing is just washing our eyes, washing people's eyes out. Because it was, it was eyes were pretty swollen. As the asbestos and everything else, the insulation and everything was in there was really irritating on the eyes. Wasn't much protection at all until a few weeks later when they set up a mass fit test station out at Shea Stadium in Queens, where you had to go out there and you had to get fit for a respirator. But that wasn't until probably 3 weeks after. I worked a tour in Brooklyn. I worked at another firehouse. We had gotten back from I don't remember what the run was. We had gotten back, and I was sitting on the couch we had a TV room, and I was tired. I was kind of passing out, half awake, half asleep, and then all of a sudden, I felt like someone stabbed me in the eye with an ice pick, like a burning hot ice pick. And I'm saying, oh, the pain was something that I had never experienced that level of pain before. I've been knocked around a bit, I've been burnt, I've been knocked around, and never experienced this pain. I thought it was an aneurysm. I figured I'm going to be dying here. Went to the emergency room, and after about an hour and a half, the pain went away, and they just sent me home with, a diagnosis was on the paperwork was unspecified migraine. I didn't know what it was. All I know was that it was a horrible pain. I thought I was going to die, and now I'm on my way home. Next night, same time, 1 a.m, happened again, and it kept happening night after night. I stopped going to the emergency room, and I had made an appointment with a neurologist. Those 6 weeks were pretty rough. I had nothing to do, nothing, but all I could do was bang my head against the wall to try to distract from the pain. The painkillers, Percocet or whatever the heck they gave me early on, nothing worked. No painkiller worked. So I saw a neurologist 6 weeks later, and I was lucky that I got the right diagnosis. The diagnosis was trigeminal autonomic cephalalgia, and it's called cluster headache. It's a form of trigeminal autonomic cephalalgia. It's a mouthful. Cluster or suicide headache, unfortunately. It gets the name suicide headache because 60, I think it's 60, close to 70% of us have suicidal ideation during an attack. And the suicide rate is high compared to the general public. So so I didn't think things can get any worse. After 6 months of the pile and everything, and now I got this incurable, pain disease.
And tell me about
that
your
I'm gonna
life.
have to live with for the rest of my life.
Like, you're talking to what's going on with your marriage? Are you, is there anyone in your life you're like, hey, I'm really in a hard way. This headaches.
Yeah, well, my wife, I've been married. I met my wife in high school. We were married. I was at 22 when we got married. So we were together for a while. I was looking for answers and looking for help. And there was nothing there. I'm episodic. So I would get them, a couple of months, 3 months, 4 months, whatever. And then, at the time, 3-4 months, and they would go away. I've had some longer stretches than that over the years, but there were the medications that they gave me early on were basically migraine medications. The abortives were these pills that my insurance covered sumatriptan pills, and they took about a half hour to work. So I'd have to get it, take the pill, and then wait a half hour with this ice pick in my eye, for the pain to stop. That's if I didn't vomit. A lot of times, your body, the pain level's so high, like you kind of go into shock, and a lot of people vomit just because you just don't know what to do. Like I had said earlier, like banging my head against the wall was a way that I would cope, and that's not uncommon for people that live with cluster headache. They bang their head against the wall to try to distract from the pain. They also, some people have done some crazy things over the years. I've had emergency room physicians that have, contacted our organization, and our organization, I'll get into that later, but these doctors were just saying how patients would come in, and there was a gentleman in the UK who actually ripped his eye out of his head with a spoon. We've had reports of people drilling holes in the side of their skull, shotgun blasts to the face, just a few, just some really horrific things that people will do to try to escape from the pain. Just to give you an idea of how bad how bad this pain is. There was a study done. It's hard to there's no way to measure pain. It's subjective.
Yeah.
And it was a study done by a PhD. He studied close to 3,000 people globally, and he asked them to rate their pain conditions. Right, you had women that have it. Women that have given birth with no anesthesia, shingles, kidney stones, burn victims, amputees, surgery, people that have had surgery with no anesthesia, all of these painful conditions that you would think, and these people also have cluster headache, and they were asked, rate your pain of cluster headache compared to giving birth, compared to being shot, compared to being an amputee or shingles or kidney stones. And cluster headache came out on top. So I mean, it's
not a competition you want to win, Joe.
No, it's not a competition, and it's I hate bringing it up, but it's kind of like you have to do it to give people an idea of how bad it is to live with this, this condition, and you get more than one attack a day too. You don't get just one and you're done for the day. My worst day was 8. So for 8 times a day, I got stabbed in the eye from anywhere from an hour to 90 minutes with that burning hot ice pick in my eye. This is the reality of people, and you have people out there that are trying to hold down a job. It's very difficult to live with this condition.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I appreciate your sharing. It's a really hard story, and we've spoken before, so I want listeners to know that there's some relief in your future, but here we are. These headaches are happening to you. How do you get through it?
The doctors early on, they were giving me just steroid tapers, and the steroid taper was working for me. 10 days I would take it, and I'd be, the attacks would go away after a day. After I came off of the steroid taper, the attacks came back. So it was just like a temporary thing. I had abortives. Like I said, I had those pills that I would have to take. I would usually have to ride out some of that pain. And then I would just, like there were days when I had nothing worked. I found online, there was a group called Cluster Busters. They were like a patient advocacy and research group. And I found on their website that they had oxygen was a treatment. So I used breathing in 100% oxygen, high flow, would get you out of a single attack. After about 10, 15 minutes of breathing that oxygen in, the pain level gradually decreased. So that was one of my coping mechanisms. They also had a study. They found out by accident that psychedelics could actually be a treatment as well. It was a study that was done with Harvard and a research institution in Hamburg, Germany. And I was a New York City fireman. I knew nothing about psychedelics. I would not wanted nothing to do with it. You go crazy, jumping off of buildings and, all of that, the paranoia that was around psychedelics. So it kind of went in one ear and out the other. It just wasn't an option for me. So yeah, for about 10 years, I had steroids were really the only thing that were working. I had my ENT. I had sinus issues. I had polyps, cysts, and one of my sinus cavities was almost closed shut from the swelling. A lot of us had sinus issues right after 9/11. I had been to the emergency room in the first few months, probably 3 or 4 times. Right after, in between in that first 6 months with sinus issues. So the doctor would go up and with a long needle and just give me a steroid injection up into my upper sinuses, and that would give me a week or two of pain-free time. But eventually the doctor told me, after about 4 years of doing it, he says, I can't keep doing it anymore. I can't keep injecting steroids into your sinuses. You're going to need surgery. So yeah, that did not want to go down that, but those were the options.
Look, you're just doing your job. You're doing your duty. And we haven't even, I mean, we only have so much time to talk. We haven't even come back to the emotional toll, which I think is really important to acknowledge and ask about. How did did you at any point, you talked about survivor's guilt. I imagine there was a lot more than that. And I imagine that was really heavy.
I didn't, there were peer counselors that came around to the firehouse, guys that were retired. So it wasn't like the job wasn't aware that we were hurting. We were all hurting. But I thought I was okay. We did a lot of drinking, to be honest with you. In those days, when we would go to we were working on the pile. When we were done in the pile, we would go to a bar. We come back in the next morning. If we weren't working in the firehouse, after the firehouse, we were going to the bar. After the funerals, guaranteed going to a bar. So we were drinking quite a bit. And that caused a lot of problems for guys, especially guys, at home too. The guys weren't going home to take care of business at home. They were just drinking and working. And, it took its toll on a lot of relationships. I thought I was doing okay. Things started getting rough for me when I couldn't cope with the attacks anymore. This was years later, like 2009. Nothing was working anymore. The steroids were only giving me a couple of days. And the pills, like I said, I would vomit them up and nothing was really working. I couldn't get oxygen. The prescription, my doctors, my health plan wouldn't pay for oxygen. So I was just using the oxygen in the firehouse. I was lucky me. I had access to oxygen at work and so I was using that to help cope. But the sinus doctor, the ENT, like I had said before, he said I needed surgery, and it got to the point where I was afraid because I was having some pretty dark thoughts. And I said, I can't continue to live like this. I was missing a lot of time at work. I had a contact point in my sinuses. I had a septal spur, and every time I went to a fire, my sinuses would flare up. That spur was cutting into the tissue on the other side of the sinus cavity, and I would get a sinus infection. This went on for years. I would go to a fire, get a sinus infection. I'd miss 2-3 weeks of work, go back, and went on. And I eventually, the doctor said, you need to get the surgery, and if you do, then chances are they're going to put you out of the job. It was a really hard decision for me to make. I had to give up the job. I got the surgery and I retired in 2011. And at that point, like the dust settled a little bit. Like my mental health did not go well after that. We had, being with the guys in the firehouse and doing the work was a coping mechanism for a lot of stuff. Even though it was daily reminders of 9/11, we couldn't get away with it. It was still, I was still able to function. Once things got quiet after I retired, things took a turn for the worst. I had issues with my lower back, and musculoskeletal issues in a few places. I was given opiates for that. I was given opiates for my headaches to try to get, to help me cope, and barbiturates as well. I got hooked on them for those first couple of years after I retired. I got hooked on tramadol. Tramadol was probably the third or fourth opiate that I was on, and then that wasn't working so great. And then they gave me OxyContin, and I was taking tramadol and OxyContin for years. So I was numbing. I was numb pretty much the whole time. I got a really bad cycle in well, it wasn't my worst, but a bad cycle in 2015. I went back to that same website, the Cluster Busters website, the people that advocate for research for people with cluster headache, and I revisited that idea of using psychedelics. And at that point, I said, "What have I got to lose? I'm not working anymore, so I'm not going to lose my job." I reached out to somebody who knew a guy that used to go to Grateful Dead concerts. We all know somebody that used to go to Grateful Dead concerts. And I ended up with a small dose of psilocybin mushrooms. And I took them in my backyard, and wouldn't you know it, the next day, the attack stopped. They stopped.
They stopped. How did you know?
It stopped. I wasn't getting the attack. The attack stopped. I was getting the attacks. I did the mushrooms, and the next day I felt nothing, and the day after nothing, and I went in remission. It put me in remission. So yeah,
so let's go back
now I had something.
I want to just take this slowly here. The mushrooms. Do you remember how many mushrooms you took, and do you remember the experience at all?
No, it wasn't in an actual mushroom. It was in chocolate. So they were mushroom chocolates. So someone gave me some mushroom chocolates. So I took the mushroom chocolate. The experience was not like anything I've ever had before. Obviously, it was a little blissful. I was in my backyard. I mean, I wasn't seeing pink elephants floating around. It wasn't a real heavy dose, but the colors, the green was like green that I'd never seen before. The flowers that were around, and the tree that was in my backyard had a different meaning. Like they say you feel connected, like you see the big picture. I experienced that. It wasn't horrible. I actually enjoyed it. But I was really concerned about the headaches. It stopped the headaches. That's all I cared about. I didn't care about seeing some bright colors for a couple hours. All I know is that I didn't want to bang my head against the wall anymore. It worked. I took it for 2 years. For 2 years straight, I used it prophylactically to stop myself from going into cycle. If something came on, I would dose a couple of times a year to try to stop it before. Around the change of seasons, spring and fall are notorious times for people with cluster headache to come out of remission and start getting attacks. So I would do it a couple of times a year around then, and it kept me, I was fine. And then 2017 came around. All of a sudden it wasn't working that well anymore. And I reached back out to, this was a 7-month stretch. I didn't reach out right away. I was trying different things. The pharmaceuticals weren't working anymore. Nothing was helping. I had a 7-month stretch where the peak of it, I was getting 8 attacks a day. And a lot of the attacks were coming at night. So I was not able to sleep. I was sleep deprived. And things were pretty bad for me. That had been the worst I had ever been before. I started thinking about how I was going to check out.
Were you on the tramadol and the opiates?
I was on the tramadol and the opiates. It turns out that was the problem. I had an uptake in tramadol and OxyContin. I was taking them both at the same time. And the receptor in the brain, the serotonin 2A receptor, those drugs mess with the serotonin 2A receptor as well as the pharmaceuticals that I was taking. So that cocktail was stopping the psilocybin mushrooms from working. And I found that out after I reached out to them again, and I said, "Look, I'm in a bad place. Nothing's working for me anymore." And they suggested you need to come off of the opiates and the prescription medications, and try again. And I had to. It wasn't easy. I was the physical withdrawals were horrible. And then on top of that, like I said, I had been thinking about ending my life and how I was going to do it. My family, the love that I had for my family kept me alive. But I got off of everything. I weaned myself off of it.
How long?
In 10 days. 10 days. 10 days I did. There were times when I was like this close to going to the hospital and just saying, check me into a clinic. I can't do it anymore. The physical withdrawals, I went down, like a quarter of a tab every day, a half a tab or a quarter of a tab to just, I was trying to rush it so I can get off it. And then I took the mushrooms and they stopped. It stopped the attacks. I went into remission again.
Wow.
I had to take a heavier dose that one time that I did. During the experience, it was a little more psychedelic than I had experienced before. And it's people try to explain what a psychedelic experience is like, and it's hard to put into words. Like, ineffable was a word that I learned. It's undescribable, and it kind of is. But what I came out with was during that time, it was like the old me, the happy-go-lucky guy that was around before 9/11, kind of woke up in my head, and I could see the big picture now. I could see how I was taking, that I was taking the OxyContin and the Tramadol not for the pain anymore, but I was taking it because I was numbing the emotional pain that I had. That I had this trauma and this grief, and I realized I had PTSD. I have PTSD, and I'm hooked on drugs. In that one, that's what the psilocybin showed me, and I realized I had to change. And I can't stress this enough. It saved my life. Had I not had that experience, I would have either OD'd eventually. Wasn't using needles or anything, but even the best people out there, they get caught up in an opioid addiction, and that's where they end up. So, either that or just from dealing with the pain, the day in, day out pain of eight attacks a day, getting stabbed in the eye,
yeah.
I would have been done.
I think to say, hey, I'm a drug addict, look in the mirror and saying, hey, I'm a drug addict and I'm numbing my emotional pain, that's not a proud statement. That's not a happy statement.
No.
How did it feel? Was there something about that experience that allowed you to accept that and see it in the bigger picture?
Yeah, absolutely. I had some shame there. I felt like how the hell did I was the clean cut guy, I was the law and order guy. How did I end up, getting hooked on this stuff? And I had, I had a whole lot to work to after that experience. I went, after that, I knew I needed help, and I reached out to some people in the psychedelic community, and I found an underground therapist, and I needed to take care of this stuff. In 2015, after I took the mushrooms for the first time, I wanted to learn more about it. I knew nothing about it. Like I said, if this is something I'm going to have to do as a treatment for the rest of my life, I need to learn about it. And that's when I met Dr. Catherine McLean. She was one of the researchers at Johns Hopkins that did the psilocybin research early on, and she was running a harm reduction clinic, a harm reduction program out of NYU in Manhattan. They were affiliated with NYU, and so I went there, and there were people from all walks of life that would just, we would sit in a room with Catherine McLean, and we would learn about the do's and don'ts about psychedelics and the harm reduction, and She also provided an integration circle where people could talk about what happened during their experiences and how you could integrate it. So, I mean, that was huge. The integration part was huge for me. I had a lot of issues with PTSD and addiction. And I think it's really important that, for people that are using psilocybin or psychedelics in general for those conditions, that they have support.
Can you tell us more about this? What's an example of sort of integrating something that was you understood better through the?
Well, the guilt, right? I mean, I had guilt that I ended up as a drug addict. I had guilt that my that the survivor's guilt. I had guilt that the way I treated my family and my wife, my kids. I was angry. I would snap when I didn't have to. I took the kid. I didn't have to do that. That wasn't me before 9/11. These were things I had to work through. There was a lot of guilt. Survivor's guilt and guilt of the way I had become and who the person I became. And there was some other, there was some other things too. It was horrific down there. Picking up body parts and dealing with the trauma of it all. Coming to processing the trauma, which is something I didn't do. I was numb, and that the integration part, the things that I had learned during the psychedelic experiences from that point on. Sometimes it doesn't come to you right away. Sometimes it comes to you 2 or 3 days after the experience, it's really important. Really important to have that part, if you're taking this stuff for PTSD, to have the support system in place. Now, the flip side of that is if you're a person that has cluster headache and you're taking these mushrooms at home, which is what a lot of people with cluster headaches do. And for over 20 years now, secretly patients in our community have been doing this in the privacy of their own home, treating their own, this ailment with the mushrooms. We don't need somebody sitting and watching. We take a low dose, and I mean, I know single moms that do it before they go to sleep. They'll take a dose of psilocybin before they go to sleep. And they sleep through the whole experience. They wake up and they're fine the next day instead of having attacks and going to the emergency room. They can live their lives again.
How do you reconcile? I think there's a voice in my head right now, and I think there's a voice in my head being like, well, how do you deal with the feeling of maybe I substitute one substance for another, with I'm not on opiates, so now I'm taking psilocybin. People, and I raise that because I think that's a question that people have about this. Like, hey, aren't you say you're off of this, but now you're using this. Do you have a different relationship?
I don't. If I never had to use it again, I'd be fine. It's not always pleasant. Some stuff comes up, sometimes it's pleasant, sometimes it's not. Sometimes stuff comes up where it's like, man, and usually when stuff comes up, it's stuff that you need to deal with. It's something that I need to address this. But it's not addictive at all. People that use psilocybin, it's not addictive. Like I'd be perfectly fine if I never had to use it again in my life. But
and it's not
there's no guilt attached to. Yeah, there's no guilt attached to it's not like an opiate, where I'm doing it to get high. This is, something different.
Yeah, I get that. I think I get that. I mean, I've been there. This is part of my journey too, and maybe that'd be a conversation for another day. But I think what's really hard to sometimes describe to other people is that relationship, and it's different from a dependency that you sort of using something every day to numb yourself. This is something that's not physically addictive. So you're not taking this every day. How often are you taking psilocybin?
I take it if around the change of seasons, I'll take it prophylactically. Mm-hmm. Once or twice, before the daylight savings time. And if I go into cycle, if I started gaining attacks, there's a protocol that that cluster busters came up with was once every 5 days until the attacks stop. If they don't stop once every 5 days, will drastically reduce the frequency and the severity of the attacks. So, like, my oxygen works better if I'm getting attacks. If I take psilocybin today, tomorrow, if I get an attack, the oxygen will work in less than half of the time that it would have worked before. And I'm not getting 4 or 5 or 6 attacks. I'm getting one attack, or I'll even skip a day. So if it doesn't knock it out, it drastically reduces the pain. Also, it works for a lot of, there's studies going on now at Yale with migraine as well, not just with cluster headache with psilocybin. So, and there are studies going on all over the place, pointing to success to use it for a load of conditions, not just headache disorders.
Yeah. Now psilocybin is illegal in the United States.
Right.
It's underground. It makes me feel, in talking about
I should say, really, yeah. It's above ground now. I mean, the FDA gave it in 2018 breakthrough status, so it's above ground now. Even though the laws haven't changed yet, the secret's out.
Yeah. And how do you feel? Tell me about yourself emotionally today. Do you feel like you've turned a corner on who you were before 9/11? That person.
I'm a better person.
Tell us about that.
I'm a better person. 2015, ironically, around the same time, after I had my first dose, I started going to Washington D.C. to help fight for the 9/11 bill. With John Stewart and a bunch of firemen, police officers, and people that were involved with 9/11. We walked the halls of Congress to get that bill passed. I did it again in 2019 with the veterans. I wanted to help out these veterans that were suffering, these guys that signed up after 9/11 especially. They were exposed to some of the same toxins that we were exposed to at the World Trade Center. And I advocate now. That's all I do. It's made me a better person. It's, the help that we got from the public in the days following 9/11, the way everybody reached out and helped us, and people around the world, was just incredible. The September 12th effect, when people just realized, it wasn't, nobody was rich or poor, black or white or what have you. We were just human beings, and we were helping each other. And a lot of us that worked at Ground Zero swore that we would be paying it forward. And this where I am today, I'm still trying to pay it forward. And a lot of us do. Some of us do it quietly. Obviously, I'm out in the public now doing it. But yeah, it's made me a better person, no doubt about it.
Thank you for that. Do you have a big picture? When you look back at 9/11 in light of everything you've experienced, and with maybe the benefit of the psychedelic experiences, do you have a different understanding of it now? With all the pain that was suffered, all the losses, how do you see it?
Yeah, the stigma, I don't see it, the way I used to, the Nixon era, the war on drugs thing. It's been used for millennia by people to heal. Going back, and I think that Ayurveda, I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but the medical texts from India going back thousands of years, they were using mushrooms to treat headaches. It's the stigma is disappearing once I started learning about plant medicines. And ironically, a lot of the medications that were used for migraine and for cluster headache, the triptans, were made from a fungus. So they just basically took a fungus and tweaked a couple of molecules, and they sold it as a prescription medication. And that would only help get rid of one attack. So it was an abortive. So they never really, where the whole plant mushroom could stop the attacks and put you in remission. But the pharmaceutical companies took that fungus and from ergot and made different alkaloids, different chemical compounds, and they'd sell it to us. But sometimes nature works fine. You don't even need to mess with it at all.
Yeah. And I was trying to ask my question. Um, you said something great just now about the history of this. I was trying to get at, want to understand better. You look back at the history of 9/11 and this historical moment in time, and shaped your life. I mean, Shanti's gone. These people are gone. There's so much pain. Do you have any perspective on that, with the benefit of 20 plus years of experience and all and everything you've been through? How do you think about that day and all the pain and suffering of it?
Well, I mean, war. Us human beings as a species have been at war from day one, and nothing good comes out of it. Um, when I look back on it now, I mentioned it before, the September 12th effect. That's kind of what I hang my hat on. And that's what I hope for in the future. Um, that someday humanity will realize that, hey, the war stuff doesn't work. Killing each other doesn't work. We were better when we worked together. We didn't, as a race, the humans, we've evolved because we've worked together. Things in nature just go better. Life in general, when different organisms work together. Sorry if I'm getting too sciencey on you, but the mycelium that between that grows the mushrooms,
Yeah.
that helps trees, with nutrients and you look at nature and we're part of it. And I think a lot of times when you have a psilocybin experience, you realize I am part of nature. I talked about the apple tree in my backyard before. That apple tree feeds me, and when we die, we're gonna go in the ground and we're gonna feed that. It's a circle. Um, and the September 12th effect was a reality check for a lot of people, and that's where I go in my head when I think about 9/11. I remember the good that came out of it, the humanity, and the way when we came together, what great things we could achieve when people work together instead of working against each other.
Wow. Thank you. Do you have anything you'd like to see on the advocacy front? We're speaking today in part because I'm a legislator in Vermont. We have a couple bills in the legislature here that would look at studying psychedelics for potential therapies. I think the evidence is very compelling. I think your story is very compelling.
Mm.
Is there anything you'd particularly want to share with listeners who are curious about this, or is there anything particularly you'd like to see um, let us do?
Yeah, I love to see legislators take a deep dive into the subject, not rely on the stuff that we've been told, for decades about how it's bad and it's an addictive drug and all of these falsehoods that were out there about it. Um, Education, educating the lawmakers right now is key because that's going to be the catalyst for change. People need to know the truth, and research needs to be done, on these substances. The pharmaceutical companies will have plenty to do tweaking the molecules for specific illnesses. Um, the psychedelics cause neurogenesis, right? Your nerves fix each other. The mental health aspect of it, if you have, it creates a new pathway, a new way of thinking. I don't have to take the drugs to feel okay. There's another way, that avenue. Um, there's so much potential, physically and for us emotionally, and how we deal with trauma and how we have our outlook in life, that we could benefit from studying these substances. And then also too, people should have rights to, to have access to this stuff if it's done in the right way. I think we need a mass education campaign, not just with the legislators, but with the public as well. The more people know about the history of it and how it's been used for thousands of years, in the right way. Shamans have, in South America, have tons of knowledge that we could be tapping to help us with, for loads of conditions. And like I said, the scientific community, they got their work cut out for them. There's plenty of conditions right now that they're pointing out that could say, potential benefits of using psychedelics, and they can get to work doing, looking for rare diseases, talking about this, how many neurological conditions out there can possibly be helped or treated or cured with these substances. So it's a field that's wide open, and that's my hope that people start taking it seriously and not looking at it as a drug and in a negative way, looking at it as a positive way and a potential.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Joe. I think your story is really important and compelling, and I appreciate you sharing. Is there anything? Do you have any?
Thanks for shining the light on it. Thanks for shining the light on it. It doesn't. Yeah, no, we don't. The word doesn't get out. Nothing's going to happen. So we need people like you to get the word out.
Well, is there anything you want to? I've been asking you a lot of questions. I want to give you the chance to ask me questions. Is there anything or bring up anything you want to bring up that we haven't touched on? Well, Joe, thanks so much for talking today on the Quilnick Experience. We've been talking. My name is Tristan Roberts. We've been talking with Joe McKay. Joe is a former firefighter from Homedale, New Jersey, advocate for cluster.
Actually, New York City. New York City. Former FDNY firefighter. When I retired, I moved to New Jersey.
Okay.
My wife's family's out here, so I'm from New Jersey.
And Joe, anything people want to look you up, learn more about Cluster Busters, learn more about anything you talked about today?
Cluster Busters, yeah, absolutely. Clusterbusters.org. I'm on the board of directors now. I was lucky, and they asked me to join. Just what I would ask people to do is do an internet search and look up psychedelics and look at the benefits of people, not unlike myself that are telling stories about success. There's a big push for mental health with the veterans right now. Using psilocybin therapy. There's 100 trained therapists right now. I just heard Rick Doblin talk about this, helping with the VA. But I would just ask people to put this stigma aside and do dig in and educate yourself on the real story. There's some good documentaries out there on Netflix. Watch them. How to Change Your Mind and Fantastic Fungi too that come to the top of my head, but there's plenty more.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.